Hi, everyone. Welcome to YouTube. Welcome to YouTube. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are on YouTube and you see a little link down below, you can click on it, and that will take you to the Zoom place. I'm sorry. I'm getting Zoom and YouTube are so great. Anyway, so if you can click on the little link and you'll end up down in Zoom. And once you click there, you can click again, and you'll end up in Mukana. And once you're in Mukana, you can start asking questions, voting on questions. You really become producer of the show. So we highly recommend trying to find your way there. It's a little bit arduous. It's a little bit of a process, but it's worth it. If you think that you can actually answer the questions, then we recommend that you come a little earlier. We open the doors at 6 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can come in, make sure your kit's working, make sure everything's kind of running the way you expect it to. And then but you have to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to be part of the show. That's when we do mic checks. So please be here, and we'd love to have you on the panel. The panel is constantly evolving and changing. And between 6 and 6:40, we can't promise anything, but we're having a good time, hanging out, talking, arguing a little bit. It's all good. And then at 7 o'clock, we start the show. So at 7 o'clock, we have a general Q&A for the first hour. Any question that you have around media production or virtual production. One thing that came up in the pre-show as a question is, can we ask a question that was asked before? And the answer is absolutely. If we didn't answer your question, or if we didn't get to all of it that you thought it could have been, just phrase a new question. If you ask us the same question exactly 2 days in a row, you probably get two different answers. So we're discussing it. We're doing the best we can, but you're more than welcome to ask things. If you don't think we hammered it right on the head or got everything out of it that we could, you're more than welcome to ask the question again. So there's no problem there. A second hour is usually something we've decided to spend a little time on. Today we're going to talk about stereo, 3D, and so we're going to talk about Anaglyphs. This is the old-fashioned red-blue glasses. A lot of people have them. I put the link out for folks. And so if you don't have the glasses, I admit we won't have as many viewers. But if you do have the glasses, it'll be fun. And we'll talk about kind of a little bit of the history of it and show a couple of examples and hopefully get you interested in thinking about it at least. Tomorrow we'll talk about networking. A lot of us, networking is becoming more and more important, whether it's on AWS or all of our equipment. And really, this is just an open Q&A. This isn't a presentation on how networking works, but really an open Q&A for you to get your questions answered and maybe some of your answers questioned. And on Saturday, we will then, it's a long day, 2 hours from 8 to 10 on education. So we spend every Saturday morning talking about the future of education. Then Nick Justishin from Drexel University will be talking about metahumans inside of Unreal. We got a metahuman. We talked about getting a metahuman into Unreal. Now we're going to talk about connecting your phone so that you can drive the face of the metahuman. And it's not as hard as it sounds. And we're going to talk through that. At 11, from 11 to 1, we're going to do a test kitchen for a future Mad in the Kitchen. And this is just a fun time that we all sit around and cook together, figure things out. We won't start cooking until about 11:30. So 11 to 11:30 is us just getting set up and ready to go. But we'll then get into cooking, and we'll send out that recipe tomorrow morning. There's a couple things to get. And then at 3 o'clock, we open up the comms, and at 5 o'clock, we have Mad in the Kitchen. And really, that is a real opportunity for you to just see production getting built up from the ground up. So you can get in there, watch us prepare, watch us plan, listen to Nate call the show. Nate Hill will be calling the show again this week. He'll be calling the show, and it's really a great, if you're into live cutting, listening to someone who literally cuts for the Olympics. So it's good to listen to him call a show. So, and then after the show, we can answer your questions and see what, fill in anything that didn't make sense when you watched it. And you actually affect the show. Your feedback on the experience as a viewer actually changes the next show. So it's a really unique experience, and I'd highly recommend it. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
Scott Mueller is up first from Clinton Corners, New York, and he says, is there any good reason to buy the Mac Mini with the internal 2 terabyte drive for $1,699 US for $800 more than the 256 gigabyte? Is there any disadvantage to using an external 2 terabyte SSD?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the main advantage is the speed of the SSD in the Mac Minis is blindingly fast. There's a number of tests you see on YouTube, people, which I think actually they're more trying to sell affiliate links of other hard drives who do a number of tests on external SSDs, and yeah, the internal SSD on the Mac Mini is blindingly fast. So that's the really biggest reason why you would use the internal one.
Good, Chris.
You got me to thinking about it. I have a drive. I actually recommended it to Mr. Lindsay, and he purchased I know at least one of them. It is an OWC with NVMe chips in it. Mine is configured for 4 terabytes. I think Alex brought the whole tank to the grocery store, put 8 in his, but it matches at least the internal speed of the iMac Pro SSD. I'm just now launching my M1, and I'm going to do a test, and I'll report back in a few minutes and tell you how fast the speed of that one is. If you're
how big is your M1 hard drive?
My M1, it's an OWC. I think it's
how much is the M1?
Good question. I got the small one,
so
I didn't need a big drive.
I think that we had a discussion. I don't remember whether it was here or whether it was in a pre-show. I don't know when we talked about this, but I remember a conversation that the 1 terabyte and the 2 terabyte options are faster than the sub. It's actually a different chip or a different SSD. So the memory is, there is a speed difference between the 256 and 512 and the 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte. Because I know that we were talking about it, I think with iPads, of which ones we got. And it might have been on Mac Break that we discussed it, but it came up that there is that if you got the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte, it'll be faster. So 2 terabyte, I don't know, but 1 terabyte may actually have some advantages.
So let's see. I'm looking at the system. No, how do you do this? You do the little Mac thing. I'll tell you what the size of mine is.
Yeah, but if it's
I'll report back.
But from what I understand, the SSDs that are below 1 terabyte and 1 terabyte and above are different. They're slower. They're still faster than. We're old enough to remember that we couldn't even. If someone told us that they'd be this fast, we wouldn't even believe them 5 years ago. You know, like we wouldn't like that would be impossible. That's
but
against
still
physics.
Slower.
We'd be like physics, man. Physics. It's not going to work, and it does. It does. But evidently the other ones are faster. I kind of lucked into it because I think we were talking about the iPad that I got that I'm still waiting for is 1 terabyte. The 2 terabytes just seemed overkill for me. Like I was just like, oh, that's a lot of money. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I pulled it up. It's not super huge because of the way my screen sharing works right now. But you can see that Mac Mini M1 base unit, the $699 cheapest one, built-in drives hitting read speeds of 2,928 megabits.
And how large is that drive?
This is the smallest one, that 256. Yeah, crazy. 1,300 on the writes, 1,300 megabytes a second.
So if anybody has the larger one, come on, somebody here must
do a test.
Run it. Yeah,
put it in Mukana. We'll read it out. Very cool. Next question.
Cool. Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas is up next. YouTube recently added a copyright check step to their upload process, so copyright claims can be flagged before a video goes live. Does this replace the need to test unlisted videos on secondary accounts before publishing? And there's a link there.
Short answer is no. Longer answer is that this is meant for anybody that needs to get that video up now. They can get the check done. So if they need to make any corrections, they can delete that video and re-upload it and get it ready for publication. But yeah, long term is, a copyright claim could happen 3 months later if somebody decides to claim a certain sound or video aspect. But
at that moment, I think that at the moment that you're doing it, I think that it does replace the need to put it in an unlisted event. And it's safer because one of the complaints that people had about YouTube is that when you uploaded it, they didn't tell you there was a problem, and then you would get a strike. And the strikes are hard because strikes take about 6 months I think it's 6 months per strike to remove it. And if you get 3 strikes, you can't stream anymore. I don't even know if you can post anymore. Like you just get cut off. So it's important. So people were frustrated that they don't know, and then they get strikes. So now strikes are rare these days because strikes are a huge flag as a copyright holder, as an owner, that you're not very nice. So from a PR perspective, you end up with people. They may not attack you for that thing, but what they found was that YouTubers started attacking the brands that gave them strikes. So they won't attack brands that give them, if you flag them, you know, they may still attack you. But if you give them a strike, and they won't talk about the fact that you gave them a strike for that video, they will just attack your brand constantly, you know, on their show, you know, because they're angry at you. And that's why a lot of brands chose not to do that anymore, because whatever they were getting out of it, they were getting more damage from the YouTubers than, because someone with 60 million followers starts whacking you. Someone with, like, you know, or 8 million followers or whatever starts attacking you. It's pretty painful, you know, and so they learn not to do strikes. So we don't see very many strikes anymore. But when you do, it's a big deal. Go ahead. It used to be that's all you got was strikes. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and this new policy may eliminate some of the problems where people would take public domain music, put it in their own video, and then claim copyright on that video, and that would cause a copyright strike automatically to kick you out, even though you're using the same public domain music in your video.
Right. So it's a great tool. It was one of the really good feature that YouTube added. Next question.
Scott Mueller at Clinton Corners, New York says, noticing that the 2020 Mac Minis only have one HDMI 2.0, two Thunderbolt, and two USB-A ports on it. Is this going to create an issue with connectivity, especially if I use an external hard disk or SSD? Is using HDMI, Thunderbolt, or USB hubs going to present a problem? And he notes, I see the 2020 only supports two displays as well. Is that going to be an issue?
Go ahead, Ken.
No, it isn't a problem. I've got my M1 maxed out, basically every port filled and a hub connected to one of the USB 2s, and there's no issue and stuff with it. And that's plugged in also into my ATEM.
Go ahead, Carl, and then Mickey.
So just keep in mind that the M1s that are currently coming out, which is the two laptops and the Mac Mini, they're the base models. So Apple hasn't released even the medium models or the intermediate models and the Pro models yet. So just be patient. Yeah,
they're really, really cool, but they are really, really inexpensive. I mean, the fact that we're like thinking about putting them into production is a funny thing. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, specifically with regards to hard drives or storage arrays, if you're unable to saturate a 40 gigabit connection, then it wouldn't be an issue. What I would call an issue is if you need multiple devices plugged in that need to be able to send sequential streams of data, like audio capture device and video capture devices that you would most of the time want to have connected directly into the machine. That's where I would start to think more about the number of connections on the machine itself.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, just to circle back to the SSD versus external versus internal. So this is an external SSD. I believe the internal drive is an NVMe. So this external is only getting 856. This is a SanDisk SSD, external that credit card looking one. 868 read, 856 write is what we're seeing. So twice as fast on the built-in. So up to you if that's worth that extra $800.
Next question.
Ari Block of Tel Aviv, Israel next. Can the panel share their views on LinkedIn Live as a platform, technology producing for and to it, and viewer exposure, etc.? It seems that LinkedIn has a habit of restricting views.
I don't think it's restricting views. I think it's just not getting very many. So I don't know if there's, I don't think that it's doing anything to stop the viewers. It's just that its notification system is not as efficient. And so, I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, so theoretically, LinkedIn Live could be pretty interesting, or is interesting, in the sense that you can talk to a very specific kind of group, in a more business, with a bit more business nature. And some people have been successful at it. And there hasn't been seemingly any really restrictions on views. There are a lot of restrictions on getting the account. So to be able to stream to LinkedIn, you have to kind of basically make a case for it. You have to have a certain number of connections or followers. I think it's like 2,500, but I'm not certain what that number is. But you have to have a fair number of connections or followers. You can only use things like StreamYard. I think that Restream now supports it. And so you can use one of those two to stream to it, but it's a pretty limited access to getting into it. And some of the software ones, I thought Wirecast was working on it, but I don't know if that actually happened or not. It did. Yeah. So Jeffrey says, yeah, you can do it there too. So there's that. And then I think the nature of the way people use LinkedIn, they're not on it as much. Now, someone like me is on it all the time. Like I have LinkedIn. I do like half of my messages on LinkedIn. So I'm very embedded into it, but I don't think I'm the norm. I know that when I send people messages and they don't come back for 3 or 4 weeks, like I used to, then they're obviously, that's a place that they keep connections, but they don't actually interact. And so it just depends on I don't think the culture is there yet of people being in LinkedIn often enough to know that you're going live. And I think that's one of the challenges is the notification. It's not like you get an email that says, hey, Joe Smith is going live. And so I think because of that, they have to be in the system or see the notification and be responsive to LinkedIn. And I think that the nature of the folks that go to it, I think that culture isn't matching up. When I see a notification for a live one, I go to it and I watch it just to see what people are doing. And I think the other problem is that a lot of the content's not that compelling. So I think you jump on it and you're like, oh, that's really boring. I'm going to leave now. So, I think that a lot of it tends to be marketers who are trying to obviously use LinkedIn to increase their reach or to try to get in there. But the actual conversation itself is pretty stale. And oftentimes the quality of the video and audio are low because they're using, oftentimes they're using StreamYard, which is a great platform, but it allows you to just throw things together and make it work. And I think the result is you end up with kind of bad audio and bad video and not a great conversation. None of those are great way to keep a lot of people watching. So I don't think that LinkedIn is limiting anything other than they're still trying to figure out where they belong. I think there's I'm kind of surprised, given that there's LinkedIn Learning, that they haven't connected LinkedIn Learning and LinkedIn Live more robustly. But maybe that's just hard. I've reached out to a couple people who built LinkedIn Live, and they haven't been that interested in doing a live portion or LinkedIn Learning to do a live thing against it. If you look at the kind of the stuff that we've been playing with, it seems an obvious connection, but we haven't seen it happen. Go ahead, Stephen, and then Bill.
Yeah, you have to remember this is going to be a very focused, smaller community you're speaking to, so you aren't going to see the views. It's not intended to do that.
Well, it depends. It depends on how many followers you have. I mean, I think Gary Vaynerchuk has done pretty well. Like he'll have a lot of viewers because he has developed a large community and a large following. It's just that the people with really large followings aren't doing LinkedIn Live. It's people with, when I say small followings, I would say less than 10,000, and that's a really hard number to aggregate. Aggregate viewers. Go ahead, Bill.
Vaynerchuk could be actually interesting.
And he's interesting too. Well, that's the other side of it is that he has a lot of people that will respond. And the reason they respond and jump on is because he puts together a good show. Yeah, absolutely. He's really good at it. He's good at a lot of things. Go ahead, Bill.
In trying to figure out where I'm going to spend my time in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, when LinkedIn Live was when LinkedIn was bought by Microsoft, they were fallow for a while. They didn't make much changes, but I'm seeing a good number now, and part of that is the moderation. Trying to get that right. I'm getting more stuff that I'm going, gosh, take your argument elsewhere, and I never saw that before. And I think it's just them maturing, trying to decide what is their moderation policy going to be. How are they going to police keeping it a professional group, which is what it was always supposed to be. Keep the politics and the rest of the junk out of there. And I think it's going to be a struggle for a year or two as they try to find their feet that way. That's my assessment.
I didn't know that they were doing moderation other than just other people on LinkedIn that told people.
I saw a huge thread, and it was one of those things where somebody had posted a picture of a politician, and the next thing you know, all the famous Reddit kind of comments were coming in, and 90% of them were keep this stuff out of here.
Yeah,
but it was an ongoing thing. I thought that.
But I don't think it's coming from. I don't think it's coming from. I didn't think that was actually coming from the platform. It's just coming from other people.
No, I just thought moderation would come in and just very quickly gone, no, we're not a political board. We're a business board.
I don't think LinkedIn's doing anything. I think it's just that LinkedIn users are not interested. So I don't think LinkedIn does anything. You can say whatever you want. I mean, I see people put political things up all the time. Next question.
Coming from Chris Comfort in New York here on the panel, Alex 40 Golner put a lot of thought into Mukana the other day regarding the upcoming Mac Pros and external video cards. Would it be okay for him to give us his thoughts on the topic?
Let's go, Alex. Lay it out here. Lay it out for us.
It was interesting. Essentially, last summer, Apple fired the gun to saying we're going to move everything over to Apple Silicon in 2 years. So that would be effectively by WWDC 1922. It's one of my 10,000 mistakes of the hour.
There you go.
2022. So that was when effectively they say they will have done the transition by then. Now, there's two ways of interpreting that. One interpretation is the fact that the Mac Pro will be on Apple Silicon by that time. The other interpretation is the Mac Pro will never move to the Apple Silicon. So because essentially with the SoC, there's no actual possibility for GPUs to be outside the SoC that is the M1, M2, M3. And the question is, how will Apple look at the Mac Pro? And I would say that maybe the last job to be done is to make it so that you can have external things like GPUs and other kinds of processing units like the Afterburner and other kinds of interesting devices plugged in to an Apple Silicon SoC. So that's the question, how are they going to do it? Now, I suggest that I thought, beginning of the year, I thought that maybe the mid-range Macs would be announced at WWDC because I thought that the spring event would actually bring the new entry-level M1-based Macs would have been something like in March. But it's not the way that it turned out. So it's really unlikely in such a short time there's going to be a new hardware being announced. So the other time that hardware is announced from Apple that is pro-related is at the end of the year, late November, beginning of December. That often happens. Happened with the Mac Pro, happened with MacBook Pros, happened with my 2016 MacBook Pro. So that may be the next kind of opportunity once we've had the full releases to do with iPhones and stuff like that and Apple Watches, then the pros get their time. So what can we do until then? Well, WWDC, I'm going to look forward to when they announce their sessions, and there's a session on Metal. Because Metal processing, everyone associates with the graphics side of Metal, but it's also a scheduling system. It's about scheduling graphics work to be done. And so what they are about is that even though you may have a really slow PCI connection on a Mac Pro, it's a matter of once it's in there, once it's in the graphics card, how does Metal schedule everything so that the pipelines are all full of 1536 cores or 2000 cores or even more cores that are actually in each card. And also in the case of MPX modules, there's two devices and they're connected by what's it called, Infinity Fabric Link, which is 4 or 5 times faster than PCI. So even though it's fantastic having these GPU cores actually on the SoC, I think the definition of a Mac Pro is a device which has external processing of various kinds. So I think keep an eye out for the session on Metal, because essentially what Apple have to do for the developers is actually give them lots of hints about how the hardware may change, even though they're not allowed to announce it. So they kind of talk about features of aspects of the operating systems of all Apple hardware. And then you just go, I think I'm reading the tea leaves to think that maybe we're going to have a larger iPad coming soon, for instance, which happened a few years ago. So people knew that they had to make their apps a little bit more resolution independent. So I think the time to look for the M2 or the M3 or something like that would be at the end of the year, in which I think the actual transition was, they probably aimed last summer to say it's going to be done by the end of 2021. So yeah, that's the time in which they will have their story in hardware of how they're going to have external GPUs and cards and stuff like that. That's my thinking on it.
Yeah. I'll be really surprised that when the dust settles, if Apple is dependent on any external piece of hardware. Like, I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I'd be really surprised. Like, I think that it makes it, I think that part of Apple's pain for the last little bit of time has really been waiting for either dealing with NVIDIA or waiting for AMD or waiting for Intel. And I think that they own their own, at some point they would prefer to own their own destiny completely. And I think that maybe that'll be a mistake, but I think that the problem is that the inefficiencies of going to an external bus are so high when you start putting more and more cores onto the silicon. So once they get to a certain level, and I don't know what that level will be, but let's say that they get to 64 cores of GPU, 64 cores of CPU, a terabyte of RAM. Let's just say that you have that kind of thing on there. Dealing with something on the outside will actually, I can't even imagine how that would speed things up. So I think that it just won't, it's not that you can't buy a faster PC, but that'll be a lot of horsepower, and I think that that's the challenge.
But it may be that Apple, by making the Afterburner card, and not necessarily doing that much with it in terms of encoding video. But the idea is that maybe you can deal with new flavors of ProRes, including, a ProRes with a depth map in it, or ProRes with machine learning based stuff in it, or AR models encoded into the video footage, and it's a new codec. You might need not necessarily GPUs to handle that. You may need a kind of essentially EEPROM. You see what I mean? So essentially, it could be that Apple is actually making these external cards to an external devices as well as AMD.
Possible. It's possible. I just I don't. It just doesn't feel like to me like that's where they're going with it, And I think that the thing is that, and I don't know, but like if for the chipset that I just laid out, there won't be nothing as fast as that. I mean, if you put enough cores into there and you're able to pack them in and keep them cool, there's not going to be anything else that like, oh, we could add something so that we could be as fast as this. The thing is that the inefficiencies of an external bus are painful. Like I've had to deal with them for a decade, and so the bus is a huge limiter. And that's why NVIDIA is going to more of like, we're going to build the whole thing so everything happens in the card, because they're trying to do the same thing. We want everything to happen without having to go to the bus. And so I think that NVIDIA is getting more and more successful with that, and so I think that we're going to see. I would be again. I'm definitely have no idea how this is going to turn out, but when I look at the trajectory, I look at like a giant beefy thing that is in the center, which is a much smaller computer, but possibly a ton of I/O to get lots of things in and out, to interact with lots of things in the outside world, but not necessarily have a graphic. I think the things that I would be surprised to see would be external graphics or external CPU, because I think that's what is so efficient when it's merged with the RAM and not encumbered by the bus. I think that's the thing that is interesting there. And we'll do pretty quick here, but Carl and then Courtney and then Nigel.
Yeah, so Apple's Afterburner card, which is their version of FPGA, that'll be used in machine learning. So Apple hasn't even started the machine learning roadmap yet, but their FPGA
that we know
card,
of.
which is Afterburner, yeah, that we know of. But if you're doing,
given that the current Mac probably took 10 years. It was probably like the M1 Mac was not something they decided to do in 2018. It was most likely something they decided to do in 2011, 2012. And it's been in that development for that long. So, we don't know. They talk a lot about machine learning. Yeah. So they're probably thinking pretty hard on it.
Their FPGA card, their Afterburner card is going to be quite amazing when they actually switch it on.
Right. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, on the same die may be a problem. They may be Apple Silicon and their own GPUs, but I think they'll move it off the die, because the more you cram out of that die, the lower your yield is in trying to produce those. But we'll see.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to glue chips together without putting everything on the same die. But I think you've got to believe that the long-term objective is to get to a smaller number of parts as possible, and they may take short-term or mid-term swings around it, but they're going to end up as a single piece.
Well, and again, I think that it's Apple. One of their big advantages is the ability for them to operate completely without interacting with anybody else. That it's the thing that makes them different. No one else can do that. You have the OS, you have the hardware, and the less they interact with external entities, the more they can differentiate themselves, and the faster they can innovate. And there's a lot of things about it that give them an advantage. And maybe it won't be, but from what we've seen with version 1, they got a lot of headroom. To go through that system. I mean, it's pretty fast. It's kind of stunning. For the lowest end chip to go at the speed. The only time I've ever seen something jump that much was when they released the G3. And that was a complete mistake. That was because the G3 engineers put a larger L2 cache on than the 604 team. It's two Motorola teams that were talking to each other, but one wasn't listening to the other one. Like one didn't realize what had happened, and it almost put Apple under because they had licensed out the G3 chips to Motorola and other folks, and were keeping the 604s to themselves. and they were about to have laptops that were, and the cheap ones were about to be faster than the fast ones. So that's the last time I saw something so disruptive. Alex.
So in practice, what we might see at the end of the year is a Mac Mini Pro with 20 ports on it, for instance. So that would be a small device, but it would be able to connect to lots of different things because there's no need for cards and stuff inside.
Yeah. So it'll be now. There may be a reason to have video cards, and so I don't know if you wouldn't necessarily see something that would be larger form factor with lots of cards, but those cards wouldn't be graphics cards; they would be video cards. They, because I can see a reason for a Mac Pro to have 2 or 3 8-channel cards in them to put lots of video in and out. So that's the kind of thing that you may still see a full-sized piece, but we'll see. Next question.
Charles Silverman, Ridgefield, Connecticut's up next. Chris Fenwick shared his Zoom Room Mac Mini pluggable ATEM setup. Can he talk about use cases for remote filming of multiple people? And is he using the ATEM Extreme for capture of the Mac Mini screens and sending his image to Zoom simultaneously?
Is Mr. Fenwick here?
Is Chris here?
He's taking his wife to work, Alex.
Let's hold that and see if he comes back. So let's just go ahead and cancel. We'll cancel that and push it back and wait
that out. And
oh no, that you put it somewhere else. You got to you have to. Okay, I don't know if there's any way to get it out. Oh, hold on, let me cancel.
It's in the Chiron, so I can read it from there. Okay, so now we're moving on to Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen, Germany. And Jonas says, can the output limiter of the MixPre 3 be adjusted to limit earlier? I want to protect my ears from other people in Zoom meetings. We can relate to that.
Yeah, I believe Jonas is talking about the headphone output of the MixPre. No, that limiter could not be adjusted because with what the MixPres are really designed to do, you want to be able to hear when something is loud, and you don't want your monitoring to be hindered. But if you're not using this audio stream as actual like production audio, and this is just for your own monitoring purposes, you can send the USB audio to a pair of input channels on the MixPre, like channels 1 and 2 linked together, and monitor that as opposed to monitoring directly the USB stream. And you can set your input limiter threshold lower. I think by default it's set to -6. You can bring it down lower so that you're essentially compressing the dynamic range of that USB stream, and you have more control of that. Or another thing you can do is completely like bring up that pair of channels, and you're constantly slamming into the limiter, and same thing, compressing it and bring down your headphone output so that you have a more controlled dynamic range on what you're listening to.
Next question.
Nick Goodfriend of Bedford, New York says, I watched David Attenborough's Life in Color last night and wondered if anyone knows the camera and video tech used for the bird images. The hummingbird's wing speed can be 80 beats per second, I guess, and the images in slow motion are spectacular.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so the Phantom 2640 has taken over a lot of documentaries at the moment. It does around 5,000-6,000 frames at 2K. A lot of people are falling in love with that camera right now.
Yeah, it's the Phantom is what most of us have used if we're using slow motion, and it can. The biggest problem you get into is you have to be really good. You don't think about it, but when you do something at that range, you only have a certain amount of memory, or it's just a lot of storage. You have to do something really quickly. Like you turn the camera on and then you do it, and it all happens like in this flash, and then it's thousands of frames. So you have to, like if you let it sit for very long, you're digging through a lot of nothing. So, but it's an incredible thing. And what's also incredible is how much a lot of that now is available on our phones, even at 240 frames a second. You can get some pretty interesting things. And I think we'll just keep on seeing, because the number one differentiator between all cell phones is cameras. For us, it's going to continue to be exciting. There's a lot of rumors that the next iPhone will have even more power. But really that's where the arms race is for all of the cell phone manufacturers, is the camera. So that's why I wouldn't want to be in that's why most of the little snap cameras have gone away, is because they don't have the budget to compete with Samsung and Apple. Next question.
Jonathan Daigle in Washington, D.C. is up next. With malware and ransomware attacks seemed ever increasing, how does the panel think about keeping computers and networks secure, both when running events from a home-based and from on-site events?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, to make it a short answer, I would say don't put anything on your production computer that you're not using for production. It's pretty much that simple. And as far as ransomware is concerned, it is very, very rare, not unheard of, but extremely rare that there's anything Mac based for ransomware. So if you're worried about it, there's your fix.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to always remember is that the reason you're not being hacked right now is because you're not that interesting. like if someone wants, like that's the first thing you have to understand. It's pretty easy to get into a lot of places. When I work, I've worked with some folks that are red teams, and their job is just to hack into corporate networks, and they'll just tell you that. I said, like, I was talking to one of them one time, and I said, so who's stopped you? And he goes, no one stops me. Like he goes, it's just time, he said, it's just a matter of time before you can get in. And it's very rarely the computer network that fails. It's the people. So, everything is social engineering to get in. It's to get you to click on things. And so, if you can get someone to go somewhere, that's the big thing. And that's why when you see, all these email addresses got hacked, like the hack that happened a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember the name of it. It's the one that they got into everybody's email, into their Exchange servers. If you had a local Exchange server, not the cloud Exchange server, they think they got into like 40-50% of them. And the reason that is important, and it doesn't matter whether they the FBI literally was so serious that the FBI, without asking, ran a worm that went in and fixed it. Like for all of, actually did, went into other people's networks and fixed it because it was such a big deal. The reason that that's a big deal is because you now have not only the emails, but the connection of the people between those emails. So now that from a social engineering perspective, you can look at what they talk about. You can look at how they're going to interact. And so when I send something to you, if I send something to JJ and it contextually makes sense, here's another file that I need you to download, and JJ goes, oh, great, boom. And it might even give me a file that I expect. If it's smart, if they're that smart, it'll give me a file back that I expect, and then they're in. And it's also why you should never, ever, but never send out large emails that are just CC. Like if you're sending them out to your school or to your little organization, it's always blind CC. And the reason you do blind CC specifically is because you don't want to allow hackers to see the relationship between emails. That is the thing that is probably the most dangerous thing inside of all of this stuff. That, and then never use one of the other things is that most of my passwords, or almost all my passwords, are long phrases that no one would know if they weren't me. And I don't repeat them. I don't talk about them. I don't talk about those subjects. They're mostly from my childhood, and they're long. They're long strings, of things that you wouldn't know if you weren't me. The rest of them are hashes. So the connection to my, to big things, to all of the emails is that. And then the rest of them are all I just let LastPass just generate 26 character garbage. Every email, like someone says, oh, you're really secure. I'm like, I'm not really secure. I just hit a button that says, give me 26 random characters, and I put it in there. And the first thing I install on every computer is LastPass. And then the other thing is my LastPass is set up so that it will log me out. If I log into another computer, it logs me out of the computer that I'm in as quickly, so that I'm not, I haven't left it open somewhere by accident. Go ahead, JJ.
So emphasis on the attacks, ransomware, all those by people who they're agnostic, and it is very much. I have a company right now that I'm helping out up in Healdsburg, and they are actively being attacked by phone, just the phone itself. People are calling the phone number, and then what the folks who are being attacked are doing, they're calling back on different phones. So now the attacker has the other phone line that they're using, and now they can call up and say, "Hey, this is blah. I need you to go down to blah and buy me 3 Amazon cards for blah because I'm stuck in blah." That in and of itself, it's whether or not you're interesting, if you have funds, because the ransomware that exists and even worse is the hijacking of systems that occurs, wherein you then have to either legitimate or illegitimately get yourself out of the stuck mess that someone has convinced you entirely through social engineering, entirely through just a phrase that you are in trouble and you have to pay money to get out of it, at which point they will own you more.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nigel.
You also have to be careful that about what other links in your building, in your location are connected. There's quite a big hack that happened a few years ago, and the basic derivation is they came in through the air conditioning system, which the air conditioning vendor had put on the internet and not secured, and they jumped from there to the corporate network. So it may be somebody in your building, it may be something you don't even know about that's not secure. So you got to think about all those links too.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh man, I could have given the long answer, but I'm thinking, oh God, we're pressed for time. It was called the Hafnium hack, and it was a big enough deal that it is the second, I think, CISA security directive of the year. So, 21-2, a big deal. Suffice it to say, Alex is absolutely right. If you're interesting, they'll get in, and in production, hopefully you're not interesting. Oh, and by the way, chances are you and no one you know is truly interesting, meaning being targeted. That said, I don't know who's going to see this, so there's that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you also, for computers that really have what they need, you try to keep them on a closed network, that you just they're not connected to other computers that do that. It's very hard to do. But we've definitely had things and then we don't gather information we don't need. And we dump the information that we don't need, often for things that were secure. We were in a highly secure streaming situation for 3 months last year. And in that area, as soon as we finished our events, we just dumped everything, like just threw it all away, as fast as we could. Like we would deliver the footage and then throw it all away. So we didn't have to hang on to it. So there's a tendency, a lot of us tend to be pack rats about things. You just want to be really careful about that. In the same sense that, a lot of us use Signal a lot, and I don't know if maybe that's a horrible thing, and the Russians have actually figured out a way back in, but we're told that it's thing, and I have it set most of the time. My casual conversations are in Signal, and they're set to expire in 1 day, sometimes 1 hour, and so those are casual conversations that are happening, and they just are being erased. If I need reference stuff, then I use email or Discord or whatever. But if I just am just talking to someone, I usually don't put all that into somewhere that's going to be stored. And so those are all things to think about. I mean, we could definitely do a whole second hour on security. We'll probably leave it at that. But the thing to remember is that most of that ransomware hacks are actually generated. The reason that they're so lethal is because the NSA generated them. So the NSA built these, and then they were stolen a couple years ago. So if you think that you're good at it, just remember the NSA got interesting and they got hacked, or they got, actually it was a physical intrusion, but the almost all this ransomware is generated because these are NSA hacks that were used to get into networks to allow them to engage in espionage, which is that's their job, and so but we have to remember that those are almost everything that we're seeing now is from that code. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada says, whoops, come on, click. There we go. I'm seeing multiple variants of the Logitech C920, Pro, S, X, E, and so forth. Is there difference, and is there a better option than a C920 in the same price range?
Not that I've seen. I mean, we've tested a lot of cameras. Go ahead, Carl.
So a lot of the differences in the 920s are pretty much packaging. So that they've actually, because the 920 is so old, they've actually come out with different molds, and they're actually just repackaging and calling the E, the S, the X. But essentially, they're all 1080. They're all 78-degree lens. Most of them are glass lens autofocus.
Yeah, I haven't seen much innovation there. We've switched to the Brios. They're a little bit more expensive. They're a lot better than the 920s and the 922s and everything else. The 920s and 922s are good. Once you get used to looking through a Brio, you have a hard time going back to the 920s. But outside of that, most people haven't invested in the optics to the level that Logitech has, or the processing. So like Microsoft has a really bad habit of having chips that aren't very light sensitive. So if there's any light issues, you'll see low frame rate really fast, because they're lowering the shutter speed so that they can keep the exposure up. And so that Microsoft ones tend to fall down in that area pretty often. So that's the problem that we have with a lot of them. The biggest thing that'll improve your webcams is light. So making sure that they have a ton of light to the level where they almost want to start clipping. Many of these will look much better if you just give them a lot of soft light. Will make it a lot easier and not a ton of contrast. So I can do this background because I have a fixed camera. A webcam will go crazy with what I'm showing you right now because it's dark and light and it'll go all over the place and everything else. And so you also want to think about your background in a way that you want actually to have less contrast in your background to allow to give the camera, not make the camera make a lot of hard decisions. Next question.
Comes from Jonas Dotel, our friend who's often here in the panel these days from Reutlingen, Germany. Ways to make a tower PC quieter is the topic he'd like us to address.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Water cooling is the best way. There are some really cool videos of people that are putting PCs into fish tanks and using it that way. There's absolutely no fans on that. However, if you have to have your computer close by like I do, I have it underneath my table opposite of my microphone, so it has the best chance of not getting picked up by the microphone. And you can also block things around. You can, as long as you put a distance in your padding and a way for the air to escape, you should be able to direct the sound in a way so it doesn't get into the microphone, if that's what you're ultimately trying to do.
Go ahead, Carl.
So there's two options. One, get the computer out of the room if you need a quiet room. If you need the computer in the room, take a look at what studios use for guitar amps to isolate guitar amps. They will fit a computer and you still get airflow.
Yeah, there are some quiet boxes that we've used that we put what we call the jet engines. These are elemental 600 and 700s that they just scream, and you put them into the I think it's, I want to call it Xbox, or it's not Xbox, but it's but it will, those will quiet down by about 60 dB. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there are a bunch of isolation boxes, and they usually have rack mount rails on them. But another thing to look at are your fans. Get higher quality fans with quieter bearings in them. And a lot of higher quality fans have rubber spacers or grommets that go between the plastic fan body itself and the metal case. So that would lessen a lot of the vibration that is resonated through the metal housing.
Go ahead, JJ.
There's a number of different also materials to put inside to decrease the movement in the metal that you can usually apply to the inside of a tower. So that also decreases the noise, both from the material sense because it absorbs some of the volume. And then one of the things that I've done is I put my fans in the walls. So if you run a fan through the wall, then the fan's on the outside of the other wall, which allows you to create basically a room that's an isolation booth, so that the airflow is in a different area.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, asks, why would a virtual events firm have a presence on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and not YouTube?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, there's still, I think, in some people, a very small and diminishing thing that YouTube is the place for cat videos and things like that. We all know it's now one of the biggest search engines on the planet, but they just may think that that's not the right target for the kind of psychographic audience profile that they're looking for. They want to kind of elevate themselves and think that YouTube activity will drag them down. That's my thought.
There's a couple things to Bill's point. The YouTube comments are acidic. So YouTube, any platform that doesn't use real names generally suffers from the dredge of the internet. And unfortunately, from our experience, that's 1 to 3%. That's the unfortunate thing, is that it's 1 to 3% of the viewers are causing 99% of the issues. And so, but they cause a lot of issues. And so, I think that what we're going to see most likely, and so that's why you tend to have less of that in Facebook, because you can block people and it's harder for them to just create another account. So that in YouTube they just keep on using different accounts when they're blocked. In Facebook in LinkedIn in LinkedIn they're just unlikely to do that. In Facebook it's harder. It's not impossible. So there's a lot of you can be a little bit more aggressive in those platforms to handle that. Also, Facebook, and LinkedIn and a lot of the other ones, you can do lots of posts that aren't videos. So you can say, hey, look at this, hey, look at this, hey, look at this. There's no place to do that on YouTube. YouTube is a video platform. So unless you're ready to build videos, there's nothing to do there. So so I think that that's also part of the problem, is or one of the challenges, and one of the reasons they probably do that. Go ahead. Next question.
Jonathan Daigle in Washington, D.C. While in Mukana, I've noticed traffic to widgetmediator.zopim.com being blocked by my firewall. Does Mukana use zopim.com? And if so, what is it? Thanks.
I do not know.
Zendesk.
Right, but I actually I'd have to ask Chris. Chris may be using. I don't know if we're using that or not. So I don't know the infrastructure there. So don't know the answer. I know we block a lot of things. So, but I don't know. I don't know what that is. So the best place to ask that would be the Mukana in Discord. You can ask, what's being used there, and Chris will tell you. Next question.
Mike Ryan of Princeton, Placerville, California. Sorry. Advice checklist for IT guys with an interest in virtual future of work. He's tasked with producing a virtual conference via Zoom webinar. I asked to outsource to pros, but the employer says we must do it in-house. There's going to be 20 sections, including pre-recorded plant floor tours, presentations, and audience Q&As. So he's looking for suggestions.
Good luck. Sorry, and I apologize. That's going to hurt. I'm happy to do a second hour. We can do a second hour on. We can talk. I'd love to help you with it. The hard part is that there are so many moving parts. It'd be like saying, okay, you're going to be quarterback for a football game. You've never played football, and you're going to go out there and play in even a college game or even a high school game. You're going to get annihilated. There's so many things that can go wrong. Go ahead, John.
This is a lot of work. Let me tell you, we have a crew of about 8 people to do something that big. And this is a ton of work. The speaker prep alone is a month worth of work.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can try to tell you a lot of stuff, because the problem is that they say they don't want to go outside. They're probably not going to want to invest in the hardware that's required to make this work well. You need comms, you need multiple computers, you need play-out systems, you need, a lot of things, and then you need to practice it a lot. So the amount of time and effort that you would put into making this work well will cost more than outsourcing it, because that you're going to outsource it to a company that already has all those skills, but you're going to have to, this is what I'm looking at in this question is deep water. This is not like we'll just throw something together, or it'll just look bad. And the thing is that you got to decide how important your brand is. Even if it's just internal to your employees, do they feel like you want your employees to think that, wow, these guys are on the ball, or are these folks are, our own company can't figure this out? That's not a great experience for anyone. And, a lot of people aren't doing it well, so you might be able to get away with it, but that time is running out, where people are going to put up with virtual events that don't run well because people are starting to get good at it, and so that's the time for that process. The runway that you have is almost gone to do that. So, but yeah, I would be researching Unity Comms. I'd be researching, how to build that up. You're going to have, I won't do an event that big without being able to talk back to the individual speakers. So I want separate computers with my own, or put it into the cloud or whatever, but you want talk back to every single presenter. You want to be able to do playback. You want to be able to, and you could do it with hardware or in the cloud, but there's no way that you do this there's no way that you will do this internally well for less than you'd pay externally to just have it done. This is, go ahead, Mickey, and then Steven.
Yeah. And of course, we don't know exactly what the situation Mike is in, but it gives me a very strong feeling, or a lot of red flags, that they may be you could be set up for just fail. So what I would say is, do not hesitate to say no. If
you can say yes, but here's the thing: in writing,
CYA.
Yeah, in writing, you need a CYA email that just says, I highly recommend again. I'm happy to do whatever you need us to do, but I highly recommend it for these reasons. We don't have this internal skill set. we don't have the hardware, to make this work. These are the kind of things. And if you want to have a one-on-one, I'm happy to talk to you about it, but you can lay that out. These are all the things we don't have to do this. This is what might happen, which is that we might see a lot of, open mics. We might have embarrassing moments. We might have long pauses. We might have confusion. We may have, poor video quality, poor audio quality. It may affect how both our internal and external viewers view the company. So I would lay all that stuff out and say, if we're willing to live with these risks, then we'll go ahead and move forward. But I would send that email out as a kind of this is what we're up against. Then when it fails, you're now the smart person. And you can do everything you can not to fail, but anything that goes wrong after that kind of email, somebody, a good employer, I don't know where you're working, but a good employer would understand that they had blown it. Stephen and then Alex.
I mean, it's taken over 5 years to develop a team that can do stuff like this. And the COVID, made it look like we knew what we were doing. But when we do major events, we go to an outside firm to make sure our look and feel is not just us. So it looks fresh. So
Part of the reason, and remember that for most corporations, part of the reason you use an outside team is because they're expendable. They're the first. They're like, if it goes wrong, they're gonna fire and you'll use somebody else the next time. But it's not. It doesn't roll up into the internal staff as an accountability. It's useful.
But part of it is secrecy and stuff like that, where they don't want an external team listening to the board of directors.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah.
But still, I mean, it really does take a lot of time, a lot of skill, and the investment to do it in-house is very rare. I mean, feel lucky.
Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, there may be a way of explaining it to the employer is saying, I am an IT guy and I think you appreciate all the work I do in IT, but it's a bit like suddenly saying we need to get an account. We got a secret project and we have to have all our money done, but we don't want you to hire accountants, but we need all the skills of accountants have built up all their practices over many years. And you're asking us to require them in the time required for you to do this. And we are IT people. We use technology, they use technology, but we're not accountants and we're not events people in this way.
And the thing that they should do, the thing that all companies should do, is start doing events regularly, like every week or every month, slowly build up internal capacity to do those meetings all the time. So, and I don't even know if they need these big meetings anymore. Like, I really don't know if companies need to have giant 2-day events or 1-day events, but having regular events and building up an internal capacity to do that, maybe external at first with the eye towards building a group of 5 to 8 people that can just run these all the time, I think is one of the most savvy things that a corporation can do right now. But I wouldn't force that team to A, launch it, or B, do a really big high profile event in front of and try to make that the first one that they've done. Go ahead, Carl.
So if you do find yourself backed into a corner where you have to do it in-house, ask your employee if you can do as many practice sessions as you can. Practice makes perfect. You get less mistakes if you just practice all the aspects you need to do before you actually do these 20 sessions and Q&As and stuff.
Yeah. Next question.
Brian Bevito, Detroit, Michigan is up next with, has anyone used the Chatalyze platform? And they have a link to it. I
haven't. I can already tell you that unstructured video frames make me crazy. so I can tell you right now that I just saw that first frame and I was like, I will never use that platform. So that would make me absolutely insane. I can't. I don't even like it. The fact that Zoom on the bottom row right now has 4 instead of 5. I hate that. Like, I just wished it was all shifted over so that it would just add to it. So I don't even like that part. But as soon as I saw that, hey, we're going to be artistic with the frames, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I haven't seen it. Next question.
JJ McKenna here on the panel from Santa Venetia, California says, will the custom speakers presentation be rescheduled soon?
Yes. Yeah, that was my fault. I had a scheduling. I didn't schedule it correctly. It wasn't their fault. And so they're ready to come back. I got to find it in there. Yeah, all my fault. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, which OWC were Alex and Chris referring to in the discussion earlier about drives?
Is there 2? Is there 2 OWCs?
Otherworld Computing
is a lot
of
OWC products.
Oh, okay. Which one? Okay, got it. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to run a little over, by the way, if people are watching, because there's not a lot of questions about Anaglyph yet, and we've still got a couple things to answer, so we'll do that. Next question.
Thomas Bauer in Steinhagen, Germany says, are there any recommendations for a live stream platform that has several languages to choose from in the player and that is suitable for use with interpreter languages?
Well, Zoom will do it. You can set up a bunch of interpreter languages and be feeding interpreters in, and people will, if you set that up, you can have many of them in there so that people can select which language that they want to listen to, and interpreters can push video into that. After that, probably the one that I'm sure that there are other ones. The one that I'm most familiar with is, of course, is the Apple. All the Apple Foundation players will support multiple video, so we do it all the time. So you have, I can have 6 languages, 8 languages, 12 languages, all going in HLS as a separate feed, interpreter feed. And when it shows up on the player, you can drop down and choose the language. I believe that the Akamai player will do the same thing. So if you're giving it multiple language feeds, it will just give you multiple drop downs for you to do it. These are not inexpensive solutions. But the social platforms, I don't know of any of the social platforms that do that well or at all. YouTube used to give you multiple camera angles. It was very convenient that there were 6 of them because there is 6 languages in the UN 6. So we would use them a lot. The multi angle. I think that was the number one use of the multi angle streaming in YouTube, was just to do languages. So YouTube used to be able to do that. When they tore out all the good stuff out of YouTube Live, they tore that out with it. So now we have something that's much more basic. So yeah, the Akamai player, the Apple Foundation player, those are the only ones that I know of that I've used that will let you do that. And then Zoom will let you do it internally. Next question.
I brought back the Chris Fenwick question that was in here earlier, and Charles Silverman in Ridgefield, Connecticut says, Chris Fenwick shared his Zoom Room Mac Mini pluggable ATEM setup. Can he talk about use cases for remote filming of multiple people? And is he using the ATEM Extreme for capture the Mac Mini screens and sending his image to Zoom simultaneously?
Yes. The answer is yes. I showed this drawing the other day, or I don't know when. I've shown it multiple times. Essentially, what I'm doing is a Mac Mini is running a Zoom Room that offers me multiple outputs. Now, the way this is actually drawn, I'm taking all 3 out of this pluggable device. As it turns out, it's actually better to drag one of the to take one of the HDMIs right out of the Mac Mini. And yes, I was using a the Pro ISO, and I've since swapped it out to the Extreme ISO. And but the same drill. I take one HDMI out of the Mac Mini, 2 of them off the pluggable, and it allows me to basically pin up to 3 people. And by hitting one record button on the Extreme, I get to record them all. Now, obviously, I don't need all 8 inputs for this, but the ISO obviously gives me other features that are quite handy.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says the DV Store's Zoom Pan has a budgerigar, like a parakeet, sitting on what looks like a rope. What's this actually supposed to be visualizing?
Yeah, Mickey, yeah, he's got it pinned. Okay, so right now I pinned me, and it's a Zoom Room running scope box. So you can see as I start to tweak my color what's going on. We can see waveform, we can see vector scope. So immediately that top left one is the flesh tone line. So if my flesh tone's off, or anybody in the panel, it switches to active speaker, you'll notice as the show goes on. So if somebody's really off, you'll see that flesh tone line not be in the ballpark. It'll be way off. And then also we can check it for things like brightness. If it's too bright, like if I crank up the gain, so that, yeah, you can see that those lines go a little hot. So they're just tools for us to use in real time to be able to see what an image is doing and if it's correct or if it's just way out there. So let me just get these back into reset. And yeah, it's just a tool. It's just scope box running in a Zoom room.
That's great.
Not
Next
a bird
question.
on a wire.
And yeah, if Guy, if you pin Alex, I think you may see sort of what Peter is talking about, which there's
so,
kind of like a curve, which I assume is Alex's shoulders.
So here comes Alex.
The big curve, that is what you're seeing is, so I put my hands down. That curve that you see is the background, is my background. So that is the background, and the reason it's curving is because it's getting darker across that background. So, once you get used to what you're looking at, I'm sitting in the center of this, and my reds look like they're a little peaked, in this at least. But that is that center exposure. You can see my head. This is my head. See if I rock it back and forth, you can see where my head is. But that what is still back there, and you can see this kind of what looks like a little bit of my shoulders here. But that also, when you look at a scope, you get also clearer why it's important to have your background and your foreground have a lot of contrast. So in color and light and everything else, is so that you stand out, and you can see that qualitatively stands out. No,
also makes you look like Groot.
Yeah, exactly. Groot, the Groot scope.
I am Groot.
Next question.
Jonathan Daigle in Washington, D.C. said, pretty sure this has been discussed, but is there a real advantage to the C922 BV C9
versus
the C920? I know the only difference is the 922 does 720 60 FPS.
Yeah, I actually think that this 922 for some reason doesn't look as good as the 920, and I don't know exactly why. So, but I have found that the quality of it, I didn't think it was as high. So I would still rather have a 920. Next question.
Lee Love in Washington, D.C. wants to talk about some of the images we've seen showing very complicated circuit diagrams. And he says specifically, what software did Tucker on comms use or others use to create flow charts for those circuits?
I use OmniGraffle, although after yesterday, I may be much more interested in in using John Barker's new gear flowchart. That looks really nice. And one of the things that you may not everyone will notice is that it's doing the circuit, that little L, the hard lines, it's doing it automatically when you connect them. I have to draw those from scratch. And the fact that it's doing it nicely is nice. So I don't know how, when you get into a more complex one, I don't know how accurate it'll be or whether it'll break, but it's quite nice that it does it that way. So those are the two that I've used. I know a lot of folks that use AutoCAD. I don't know if other people have other ones that they use. Visio is another one that's popular for doing those, but I'm not sure what Tucker uses. Next question.
Tyler Roberts in Chambersburg says, what is the recommendation for an SDI patch panel or conventional pass-through, exploring both options, 24 in, 16 out from a Ross Carbonite Ultra?
I believe it's a Neutrik connector. There's a standard Neutrik connector. I usually put them all in from scratch. I mean, you can buy ones that are all built in, so they're SDI pass-throughs. I tend not to do that. I tend to get ones that are, they have a Neutrik. I think Mickey was showing those a little earlier. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm digging through my desk here. Wait, yeah, these are what you call D-style connectors, and they're all the same shape, but they come in all sorts of different types of connectors, including BNC connectors. And
they do take up more space because they take up more space because of that, but I have a strong preference for them because if something breaks, you can replace it. Or if you go, I really wish two of those were XLR and not SDI. There's a whole bunch of reasons that I'd prefer to build them modularly. But we've bought both. You can fit a lot more into a space if you don't make them modular. You're just kind of stuck with that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Exactly, you can fit a lot more if they're not the modular D-style connectors. But with the D-style, on a single rack unit, you could fit up to 12 of them, 12 D-style connectors, and you can also get little wall panels for them as well.
Yeah, but I think that's the approach we learned to go to. When you start, you always get the ones that are all built in because they're cheaper and they're easier. And you put them together, and by the time you finish, you're buying modular ones because you broke one off and now you have a whole rack that has one that isn't working anymore, or you want to have something that's more customized, and it's been our experience. And then the other thing is you can get ones that are recessed so that you can have the SDI actually go into the system, so it kind of protects that connector as well. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas has our last regular question with how did Elon Musk do on Saturday Night Live?
I don't really watch Saturday Night Live. I don't know. Go ahead, Bill, and then Carl.
Surprisingly not horrible in this respect. And I will give him credit for one thing. He announced right at the beginning of the show that he has at least some mild form of Asperger's. And so I think that community probably took huge amount of plus for the fact that somebody who has some form of that syndrome has done exceptionally well. That probably gives them some hope for things. But, wasn't horrible, wasn't bad.
Carl?
I thought it was pretty good considering his mum was there. It was kind of good. In Australia, we don't get SNL at all. So SNL actually put up a YouTube live feed for outside of America. It's the only time they've ever done it. They've never done it for any other show. So they promoted outside. They were going to do this live, and they did it. And then once it was out, it was gone. You couldn't watch it again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty. Well, let me just show you what happened after he appeared. So this is right before he appeared, right here. This is Dogecoin. This is the drop that occurred right after. So I watched my portfolio erode like tens of thousands of dollars, just like that. Boom, all off of his appearance. So kind of interesting to see.
And what did he do that affected the value?
He called it a hustle at the end, which hustle to certain people means, like can be like conned or something like that. Whereas hustle nowadays to millennials could mean like you're hustling, you're getting after it. But him saying that just destroyed. Or there's some other stuff going on behind the scenes that, Tesla bought like $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin or some crazy amount. And so there's a lot more behind the scenes going on. He loves it, and his tweets just affect the market so much, though. It's crazy how much, like to the tunes of billions of dollars. Like yesterday, he tweeted, Tesla is no longer accepting Bitcoin, and Bitcoin dropped like 10%, which erased like billions of dollars off of the market. It's crazy.
The question really comes into, and we're not really the forum for this, but the question really comes into, at some point you get a lot of attention from the SEC, because if you're able to affect, once you start getting to a point where you can, because you don't make money on rise and fall, you make money on rise and fall. So if you do random things that cause the market to go up and down, you can just pump the market a lot. That's how penny stocks make a lot of money, because it's volatility that produces, wealth. Courtney.
Yeah, I think he was sending a secret message with his acting that the next Tesla will be a wooden.
Be a Wookiee?
Wooden.
Wooden one. Okay.
Line, Courtney.
I don't know why I thought that you said that there would be a Wookiee, but I think a Wookiee Tesla would be amazing. All right, so now we're shifting gears, and I'm gonna pull this over here. Let's see if I can get this working. Okay, everyone get whoever has glasses. Hold on, I actually found clip-on glasses. So I'm going to show you just a handful of images, and then we'll talk about it. See ya. And if other people have examples of ones they'd like to show, you can find them on the web. I'm just going to show 4 or 5 of them. I'm not going to, it's not going to be a whole like slideshow. We might do this again if people like it. But I guess the reason that I wanted to show this is to hopefully get you engaged. So what happened was when Dawn was on and talking about 3D, I got really interested in it, and I was like, I wonder how much stuff is Anaglyph. And as I started to put it on, I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that's Anaglyph. And so anyway, so let me put my little thing on. There we go. So clip-ons for your glasses if you need them, that you can get all of the stuff on. And I was going to try to, I ran out of time. I was going to try to put my own self in Anaglyph, but it didn't work. So let me cut to this. So a couple images for you to look at. And again, if you're watching, if you're in the panel, or if even you can even put links in but if you want to show anything, let me know. But here is I don't know if you guys can see that. So So here's an example of something very old. This is Italy, you know, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to show this was to show how long people have been doing this. So really all it took was taking pictures in stereo. And this one is a little bit off in the far end, but I still feel like it is it's visceral. You suddenly feel like you're more there than what you had before. Let me let's see here. Sorry, my mouse is lost. There's that one doesn't work. What's interesting is it doesn't work. It works in my local image. Does that look okay to you guys, or is it somehow swapped?
It's not working well on my computer screen, but on the TV that I'm using for a confidence monitor above, it looks great.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I haven't done this over Zoom, and it seems like something is awry because it looks great on my local one, and then on my computer screen, to your point, it doesn't look good. Interesting.
Looks good here.
It looks good there. So these are very old anaglyphs. This is a rendering, I believe. So this is just something, so you can render it in 3D as well. It's just a matter of building it in stereo. I do find it interesting. So are you guys seeing the same thing where in Zoom, in some monitors, it doesn't look good, and some monitors it does? Here's a completely fantastical design. I'm trying to figure out what's going on there. I think it must be the nature of an LED, because on the same image on my Wacom tablet, I admit I didn't test it that way. On my Wacom tablet looks amazing. For some of you, do you see that? Like you really feel the geometry of it? Looks good.
Yeah, it looks good here. Yeah.
Interesting.
I see the geometry on both screens, but on my laptop, there's a little, it seems almost like they're not registering as well.
Yeah, no, I have the same thing on my, but what's interesting is the same image on a computer, in Zoom and on the computer screen looks different. That's the thing that I find fascinating. So let me, we'll get out of that, and I'll show you a little bit of, let's see here. Oh my gosh, hold on.
Yeah, I wonder if it might look better if you screen share, because I wonder if the ATEM might be doing some sort of, crushing or shifting.
Let's try it. I think it's worth it, because if we ever do this again, it'd be worth to know what happened. All right, so let's see if it makes any difference. But what's interesting is through the ATEM, though, on my Wacom tablet, which is also through the ATEM, it looked fine. So, but we'll try it. So I'm going to try, this is kind of an odd experiment here. All right, so play to window. Okay, and then I'm going to go to Zoom, and I don't know if, oh yeah, I can screen share. It does look better in screen share for me anyway. Does it look better for all of you?
Looks the same to me.
Same to me, but mine was looking quite good.
Oh, that one looked worse.
Yeah, that's way off.
Huh. It's interesting. Some of them look better and some of them don't, based on whether we're screen sharing them or not, which I think is fascinating. All right. So I think part of what I wanted to show was just how easy it was relatively easy it is to make these. So one of the things that I did was that I built, don't make fun of me. Take this off for a second. I built a very, very basic box. This looks very simple because I didn't spend much time on it. Now, this may look silly, but what this does is if I take two phones. I'm just trying to find well, you're going to see something. You're going to see something very sad about one of my phones, because I just grabbed one of my phones that took a hit earlier this week. So anyway, so this one's broken. But what you're going to see here is that Oh, no. Yeah. So what you're going to see is what I did is I aligned the lenses. Now I can only align these two. I can't align this other one, but these lenses are roughly, if you look at it, roughly interocular. So they're roughly the same. I kind of averaged it out. I simply printed a rig that would hold both of them in place. This is definitely a raw prototype of, can I get it to work? Right. And so I just thought about where does it need to go so that I can line up those lenses there. So, but the goal is to line these lenses up with these lenses so that they are roughly interocular and aligned vertically. And I'm happy to, if someone really wants to play with this model. It's a horrible model for a variety of reasons. By the way, there's like a little fur here of stuff. That's what happens when you don't do a proper boolean and then you just throw it through your printer. It was going back and forth between two things and kind of created a web. But it didn't matter, because all I was trying to say, I took it to the beach and was like, does it work? And so from there, you take photos or video. And what you can end up with once you've done that, let me pull up Photoshop here. And you can ask any questions that you like as we kind of go through this. Pull this up. Let's see here. So I'll share this with you. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I noticed that one of your cameras had the LiDAR firing, the one that was broken. Any reason why that one was firing, the other one wasn't?
Because it was on, and the camera's on. The phone lit up. The other one was just asleep, and so both the camera and the camera was on the phone, and so it just as soon as you turn the camera on an iPhone 12, it'll start. The LiDAR begins. So anyway, so let me share this out. So this is from these phones, from that rig that I just showed. So you'll see that this is, and if you put the I don't know, how does that look for all of you?
Actually, pretty good.
These look good.
It's good.
A lot
Really
cleaner.
good.
Yeah. So that shot, and it should feel like that log is just about coming out of the screen.
Yep.
Is that how that looks for you?
So the parallax is about right. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things about it is it's not just it's not just building a rig for it, but it's really thinking about things that are going to look good in this type of environment. So what you have here is you want something that is going to protrude. If it protrudes too much, it'll not work because you can only get so much out of 3D, out of 2D, 3D, so on and so forth. But having something with strong vanishing points is something that really helps a lot. As far if you take something that's flat, you don't get it. But what I've got are lots of stones, and I've got that log, and I've got things happening in the background. And so all of those things kind of create lots of points of interest for us to see the change. It was funny. This is not a fake. A lot of times what people do is just shift the color or shift it and then change it to fake a 3D. Because of that, you really do see the true parallax. And if I turn now, the only thing I'm doing to do this is I'm stacking the two eyes on top of each other, and I just on the top one. In the blending options in Photoshop, I simply turn off the red channel. So there it is without the red channel. You can see it flatten out. And for the top layer, and there it is with the red channel. Without, you see how flat it looks suddenly? And then how much dimension it has there. Did everyone see that?
Yeah, it just takes a while for the screen share to update. I think it takes 2
Oh, got it. So
it's working great, Alex.
But you can see how much of a difference it makes when you're looking at it flat here. It's just, it's not a particularly interesting looking image. And then you end up with a much more compelling image, in my opinion.
Well,
so that's why I
got
guess
parallax. If you move your head when you're in 3D, the background and the foreground shift differently.
Yep.
When you go to flat, there it's just flat.
And you're not seeing any real change in the pixels. It just feels different because of the way you're moving back and forth. But it definitely gives it more of a sense of 3D. And I feel like one of the things that's interesting about it is that and now that we've seen some idiosyncrasies, we have to do some more tests. I was like, it's really interesting the idea of the even over something like Zoom, something like stereo would work. Is something that I find fascinating. Here's another photo that I took on the beach there. So here is my lovely wife, and hold on, she was willing to. There we go. Oh, let me see. Make that a little bit. Well,
It's a little tiny thing, but the green box behind the type makes it virtually unreadable for me. You are viewing Alex Lindsay's screen message.
Oh, right.
Is really degraded. So I'd have to remember that if I was ever going to work. The color choices is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
The convergence on this one's a little bit too exaggerated.
Well, it's not. So the interesting thing about this, there it is flat. So you can see the difference. It's not that the convergence is exaggerated. It's that there is just nothing behind her. So that's just the nature of, it is just way back there. And that's getting to the limit. So one of the things I learned from this photo, and the reason I wanted to show it, number one is if you look at her, the hair right here, look at how it really comes out. When I turn off that red channel, see, it's just there. And you really have volume or perceived volume right in here because of that hair kind of popping out. But what's really fascinating, though, is that it's because there is so much distance. What we're getting to, and this is something that I learned doing this shot, is that there is limits to what you actually want to, how much you want in the background without anything in between it. So the reason that this looks like it's over converging is really because of the distance, the amount of distance between her and the next thing that you can reference. And so it feels very aggressive, which your eyes will adjust to, and then they'll hurt when you take off your glasses. It's one of the things you have to be careful of with 3D is that your eyes will figure out how to make it converge and make it do what they want it to. We have to remember that, our brain does most of the processing. What our eyes get is completely different than what our eyes are receiving isn't the world around us. It's something that our brain has figured out how to describe, based on what the eyes are sending it something, but it's not the image we see in front of it. It's the mental picture that the brain has created based on the stimulus. And so it'll figure it out if you watch long enough, but it'll hurt to go back and do it again. So anyway, but one of the reasons I was so excited about it, and we might not, if we don't have a lot of questions, this won't be a very long presentation, but what I was excited about was I spent a lot of time researching this, and there was a lot of unclear descriptions of how to do this. And what I found so fascinating was that it literally was just turn this channel off and turn this channel on. If you're shooting in stereo, there's lots of ways to do it if you're not shooting stereo and how to fake it, which doesn't look very good. I found it to be very compelling to have two cameras that are taking those photos. Now I'm just doing this right now as a photograph. I'm just doing, like I just take my fingers literally just are tapping on both of those at the same time. Two thumbs, I guess. And so it's all manual. What's missing right now is there's no piece of software that will have the cameras fire at the same time. Just saying, if anyone's watching, it's not something I'm going to create.
There is. So Godox.
And if anyone wants to if anyone in this group wants to find other ones on the web or whatever, you're more than welcome to pop one up and we can show it. But I found it to be just a fascinating thing that it isn't that hard to do. Do we have has anyone posted any questions here?
Yeah, the first question just came in. Luca Capadoro in Milan, Italy is watching and says, could you please repeat the process in Photoshop to make the red show up?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me reshare this.
Yeah, for this, it might be better if you use the ATEM Alex, because we weren't seeing all the windows because of the permissions that we have with screen sharing.
Copy that. Just give me 1 second here. It's interesting because they're all, to Photoshop, they're all one window. Oh, no, because that one pops out. I got it.
So there is a way to fire 2 iPhones like exactly the same time.
Uh-huh.
As long as they're on the same firmware, same cameras, essentially. So I've got a TRRS Y splitter, and you put headphones into a female, going out to 2 males, going into 3.5s to lightning.
There we go. There we go.
I've got it.
Whoop.
There it is there, just to show everyone what it is.
Yeah.
Focus. Yeah. So it's a Y splitter, so TRRS.
Oh, that's genius. Okay. So so that'll fix it. I'll put that in my next rig. Is like a little thing that would let me, and then you're just using one
headphones.
of those. You can just use your headphones.
Apple headphones. And
okay, that was worth doing the Anaglyph one. I thought it was a bit of a risk to get everybody to put glasses on. So anyway, so you'll see here in this layer, what you're going to see is this little blending option over here. Sometimes it says FX, and you double click on it, and then a window pops up in the wrong window. Hold on, and then I pull this over. So in the layer, in this, you'll see blending options at the top. So typically you have, all these other effects, but you don't need those. It's just this one channel. Just turn that channel on and off. That's all you have to do. So if you're shooting in stereo, if you're actually generating the content with a stereo window, stereo cameras, all you have to do is take the top one and turn the red channel off, and then it'll pass through, and you'll see the stereo there. And that literally.
And to which eye do you do that?
I do it to the top layer, which I believe I have as the right eye. I will admit that I don't remember. I remember doing it and then swapping them because they weren't correct, and I'm not sure which is which. So that's something we can figure out. But that was the when it works, it'll either be horribly wrong or just right, really fast. So, but it doesn't require a lot of filtering, doesn't require a lot of other things, and you'll get that output. And I think that. I guess my interest was really to show people how easy it is to do this. I mean, relatively easily. You need to print a rig that will hold your cameras at a width apart. There's also, the other thing to know is that there are rigs, there are stereo rigs that will have 2 mounts for your camera, and there's been a lot of different people that have made them. So there are, you can get 2 different types of stereo mounts, but a lot of them are for a variety of reasons have 2 1/4-20. So you can put cameras up there. The hardest part is making sure that they're all rotated correctly, that they're stiff, and they're both cameras are on the same plane, because you have to worry about convergence. Now, sometimes you actually want to adjust convergence. That's a whole nother set of rigs. So you have to kind of think through that. But that's anyway, I thought it would be kind of fun to take a look at it. I'm amazed at how well I think the thing is that I was taken back by was how well it worked. Was that things look really 3D, and they're really interesting as far as, what they have there. It's fascinating. Next question.
Eric Price in Leavenworth, Kansas says, beyond turning on or off the color channels, do you change the transparency of the top layer to see the one beneath?
Just turn off that red channel. It just passes through. The other channel passes through. So it is, I thought I was going to have to figure this all out, because all the YouTube videos are based on how to manipulate a 2D image to look like it's 3D. And then what they're not doing is just saying, I'm going to actually shoot something in 3D. That's the part that no one seems to be doing. And so as a result, when you actually shoot it in stereo, the only thing you have to do is turn off that red channel on the top layer. And if you have the right one in the right place and so on and so forth, it just suddenly just pops out. There's no extra work. So it's, and that's, I find that to be fascinating. Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, why left, red, blue, right?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's it has to be one or the other. And well, I would say that most likely because the glasses are that way. Like if you bought glasses with these swapped, you would need to swap everything. But there is, I think that it's not. I think that the nature of it. I don't think there's a reason that color needs to be one way or the other than that has become the nomenclature of how it gets done. Go ahead, Carl.
So it was just that had to decide when they put it into cinemas back in the 50s. So in the 50s, when they started these anaglyphic films, they had to decide which color, because before that you had the viewers. And the viewers, that's the older black and white stuff you had. That doesn't require color, of course. But when they did color versions, the cinemas had to pick away, and essentially the one that took off just had that format.
Yeah. I mean, and we saw the 3D with the viewers that Don Kamarachka was showing, and that's what got me interested in it. So I sent it to Don. I sent that photo, and he's like, "You shot that in 3D." Like he immediately knew, like as a 3D person, like he knew that Don knew that I wasn't just manipulating the image. Jordan, is this another one? Ken, Jordan? Oh, Ken's got a couple of them here. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a couple that I've found.
Yeah, and I just feel like what I think is really interesting is that you do in 3D have a different sense of where things are. I think it makes it's just a different image, and again, I think it feels much more immersive than what you have here. And the reason that getting good at this makes a difference is because as we see more, thinking in 3D is important, because as we get more into VR and AR, you're going to need to think more about this as a media producer. Now this is a cheap, easy way to do that right now that you can play with and you can enjoy it. And we may come back to this. We won't do another second hour on it, but I'm just letting everybody know you don't have to worry about that. But we will probably have some labs or other things if there's enough interest to do it. And maybe we'll build an anaglyph channel that people can just post cool anaglyphs that they have that people can look at. But I think it would be really fun for us to go out and shoot a bunch of photos if there's enough people that build that rig or improve on my really bad rig, and see things from all over the world. It'd be kind of a fun little thing. Go ahead, Carl.
So if we can see this, so this is, I've only got one side at the moment, so there's two quarter 20s. The quarter 20s can be moved, so they can be slid in and out, so you can change the convergence.
The hard part with the phone that I had was that I needed to move each one up and down independently.
So so this one you would only have to do one, because you can keep one fixed and change the convergence. You're right as far as the convergence itself needs So I've read the IMAX manual on how to. So when you rent the IMAX 3D cameras, it comes with a manual. I've read that PDF. I did work experience at IMAX Cinema, and I kind of got fascinated by it all back in the 90s. And it just says you do tests at 3 different convergences, and that's it. So whenever you rent an IMAX camera, you usually have 2 days of testing of convergences, and you're right, with distance between foreground, midground, and background. So your wife and the sand dunes in the background, that'd be a test you'd do. You'd pick 3 different convergences and decide which one looks the most pleasing.
Right.
It's a pleasing thing. You're right. It's a psycho thing more than a technical thing.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, John.
I went to a seminar that JPL/NASA did, and the lady was explaining that when they're driving the rover on Mars around, without using AR and 3D techniques, it used to take them hours and hours to calculate the trajectory because they couldn't see. And when they did it in 3D and AR, they were able to move the rover around a lot better.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, being able to see things and gather depth while you're doing it is pretty important. So, I think that there are a lot of good technical reasons for it too. But I think that there's a really interesting opportunity. This is kind of me kicking it out there. If there's enough interest within the group that builds up, we'll do some, again, we're not going to do a second hour about it, but we'll do some labs on a Saturday or whatever, where we show what we're shooting and talk about it and see if we can't build up something that'd be kind of fun. But now that I've seen that there's some issue with the way Zoom presents it, I got to figure that out now. Like what's going on. So that was a good experiment from that perspective. Next question.
Moving on, Paul Valus here says from Austin, what's the greatest 3D movie ever made? And his answer, he says, is in the notes, which are not attached.
Carl?
Alfred Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder.
I would personally say Avatar. You know, like when you actually see it on a theater that can generate that, and you see how much work. I mean, when they built it without going over the top, and they incredible technology and resolution, and it just worked. Like the whole thing worked. I haven't seen another movie that is as good as that. I haven't seen the Alfred Hitchcock one, so I can't compare it. I can't argue with Carl because I haven't seen it. But I felt like, from a pure technical perspective, I felt like Avatar was the high point and got everybody excited. And then they screwed it up by putting everything on cards, you know, and faking it. And then it just didn't look right. And then people aren't willing to pay for it. And then they stopped doing it. But what's interesting is all the technology that made it. We got really good at doing it. I did a lot of 3D early on, and I got made money at it, so it was a good thing. But it was, it just kind of died off. But all the things we learned are now useful in when we're doing stuff for headsets, because all the headsets are going to be in 3D. That's why I kind of wanted to show this, is that, hey, getting good at this now and thinking about 3D is useful, because you're going to do more of it soon. As more people you want to be all in 3D. Go ahead, Mickey.
I'm not a huge fan of watching films in 3D, but one that I appreciated was the 3D release of was it Disney? Yeah, Disney's Brave, and it works so well because they did a totally separate Atmos mix specifically for the 3D release.
Oh man,
it worked well.
Yeah. And I do think that where these get really interesting is in the headsets. Oculus and HTC and so on and so forth, is now they naturally are giving you two separate eyes. And I think that as more people put those headsets on, they're going to want, if we figured out how to create more of that kind of content, people would be interested in it. Next question.
Nobody mentioned space chimps too. I'm shocked. Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, how far can you increase the lens spacing to get, quote, more 3D before it's too much?
Go ahead, Carl.
So 17 centimeters is kind of what the human eyes is. Once you go beyond that, you have negative convergence, where your eyes will actually go outwards. So what we don't naturally do when we look to infinity, our eyes are parallel. You've got to be careful not to have the viewer's eyes go outwards from each other, which is negative convergence.
If you want to have some fun, and I think it's 7D, or 7 centimeters, right? 70 millimeters, I think is the
17 centimeters between pupils. That's a maximum you're allowed to go with camera. With camera apertures, is the maximum you can do is 17 centimeters. Yeah.
But I think our pupil distance isn't that much. It's more like 65,
distance about
75.
It's about
millimeters.
Millimeters, it'd be about 90 maximum.
Maximum. Yeah, that'd be maximum. Yeah, I think they're closer to, I think I built mine around 65 or 70.
PL mount can't do that. So the PL mount was designed for 17 centimeters. That's why.
Right. And so where that becomes a problem is things that are close to you. And the other thing you can do is when there's a lot of things farther apart. I think the furthest apart we put our cameras was 10 feet, which turns out to be really hard because you're putting them on this giant rail and you're putting them apart. Now that was to shoot a landscape. So what you do is you can, if nothing's in front of you, right in front of you, you can open up that distance a lot, and it'll create this kind of forced perspective 3D that occurs because it's like a giant looking, it's like a huge giant, James and the Giant Peach, it's like a huge distance between the pupils. So, and then you can also have them get closer together, and it just doesn't look as stereo. So the funny thing to Carl's point, you can have control of convergence, so that Preston makes one that we used, and I don't know if that's what it's done, but we could do zoom focus, but we could also do convergence on the Sony camera. It's on a, because we didn't put them side by side. We put them through a beam splitter so that they could get closer to that piece. Anyway, the funny thing is that if you play with convergence and you do it slowly, it's like boiling a frog. Someone will just keep watching and you'll just pull their eyes apart. Like it's just like it's always, and you do it to people no matter what. Like everybody does it once when you have control of convergence. Is you just do this slow pull and then suddenly you see them pull their head back because they suddenly realize their eyes are doing something that they shouldn't. Next question.
Edwin R. Ruiz of Chicago says, I see you are disabling the red in the top layer only. Would there be a value to disabling the blue on the bottom layer?
I tried that. I didn't find that there was any. We can open it back up again, but I don't think I need it. I have to admit that it worked, and then I stopped. Let's see here.
It will make your greens more accurate. It won't make skin tones more accurate.
Yeah, I think everything will fall apart once you do that, but we can do it. Let me let's cut to it. And I will go to the bottom one. We'll go to our blending options, and we'll turn off the blue. How does that look? So that's so you turn it on. Actually, I don't see any effect because there's nothing underneath it. So there's nothing, by turning the blue off, nothing happens because there's nothing for it to blend to. So it didn't have any effect at all. So there you go. So no, doesn't help. Next question.
Ken Means in Los Angeles says, have you seen the 3D video from Mars? And he's got a NASA link there.
NASA has actually done a fair bit of this. Let's pop this in here real quick. These are, let's see, there's raw images. Oh. Yeah, I don't see any that are 3D.
So if you go to Perseverance Twitter account, they just released one yesterday.
Can someone pop it up? We'll jump to the next question while we're playing with that. Next question.
Luca Capadoro, Milan, Italy says, when I was a kid, I had glasses that used red and green. Any advantages, disadvantages versus red and blue?
I think red and blue will be better because of natural things behind you. I think if you did it with red and green, you'll end up with more color shifts within greenery behind it. So I think that would be the only thing that might not be as accurate there. Next question.
Next question comes in from Stephen Kimbrough here on the panel. And Stephen says, it is amazing that the technology is not really advanced in this area and has failed again commercially. So does 3D advance the story, or is it going to be a toy for a while?
I think it advances the story that you really feel like you're there. I think that we are going to, there are things that I've worked on that extremely compelling. So, but we have to start thinking a decade out. The reason that I think we're going to keep on coming back to 3D is because it really changes the way you view things. Now that part of the problem we had was resolution, brightness, those are all things that we were challenged with in theaters. Part of what's also going to make it easier is VR goggles that we can, as these start to reach 8K per eye, we can do a lot more, and we're not trying to layer something over with polarization or colors or whatever. We're just giving you two images and they're just coming in. And I think that those get really interesting when you start talking about concerts, when you start talking about sports, as the frame rates of those, increase in speed. So again, I haven't seen it. So I've seen large scale 3D that's done really well of an event at 60 frames a second, not at 120, but I have seen HDR 120 frame per second, 8K, and it, without the stereo, just looks like you're there. Like you're just, and if you added stereo on top of that, I would, there are many things that many people would do at home instead of going somewhere if they had access to that feed. And I think that is, the opportunity there to make that work. So I think that it's just going to be another step of feeding. Oh, this is Carl's. Let's see here. Pin this. Let's see.
So yeah, this was released, I think, about 24 hours ago. This is actually the helicopter flight. So you're actually going to see the helicopter in 3D as well.
Haha, that's funny. That's great.
So yeah,
But you,
Movies from Mars.
yeah, 3D. We're getting 3D movies from Mars. It's a good time to be alive. All right. So, but I do think that there is an immersive flavor to it when it's done well. The real problem, I feel like the thing that kills 3D over and over again is people cheating, like not shooting with 2 cameras, not shooting with the right equipment, not shooting, that is where people go, okay, we can do it. How do we do it cheaper? And that is not the way to make this work. The way to make it work is how do we do it really high quality? So, I'm more interested in that. Like one of the things that I'm trying to find while I have this, I'm testing this 12K is kind of put two eyes on that, effectively, because now I got a lot of resolution to work with. So, anyway, so those are things that I think are interesting, in that process. And so, I think we're going to keep on coming back to it because it when it works incredibly well. Next question.
Charles Klein, our friend in New York City, says, this is great. Have you tested this technique on footage or motion graphics? And if so, how does it deal with motion blur specifically?
Motion blur works well when you are in graphics, especially because you can truly render it properly. The main thing you have to deal with in motion and motion graphics, I shot some videos. I don't have them up here right now. Because I was able to shoot video, with the cameras. The problem with motion graphics and the problem with video in general is you have to be gen locked. So the gen lock is the thing that is the most important. And so I couldn't do it with my phones in the same sense that I probably could do it with, what we have done it with cameras, is that all that motion blur and everything else will work, but only if, and I think we saw that with the NASA one, you saw a little bit of flickering. And that's because those cameras, I don't know if they were gen locked or not, but they're not, it doesn't feel like they're registered. And so that is more of a challenge. Go ahead, Carl.
So when Peter Jackson did The Hobbit in 48 frames a second, the 3D version looked amazing at 48 frames a second. It didn't feel like a soap opera. I personally saw it in 24 frames a second 2D and 3D, which was only in 48 frames a second. You couldn't see it in 24 frames a second. So that kind of experiment worked for Peter Jackson. The people who saw it in 48 frames 2D, I don't know how they did it because pretty much I think it's always 3D. That would look like a bit of a soap opera, I guess.
Right. 24 frame and 3D does not go very well together. So what really works with 3D is to increase the frame rate, a lot. And again, I will keep on saying we're going towards 120 frames a second. Like we're definitely, there's patents for companies that are talking about 480 frames a second down the road. They're already patenting the ability to do that, but we are definitely going to 120 in the next 2 years. So that's going to make things like this a lot more doable. Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, is back with, could this effect be done with color modulation using a single sensor? He's thinking about the speed of color reflection, like when the sun sets in the sky, or knowing the gas composition of stars.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
No, so it requires parallax. It does require 2 points of view. You can change those points of view, but it requires 2 points of view.
Yep. Next question.
Paul Valus in Austin, are 3D TVs totally dead?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Not for racing games. So I have Gran Turismo, which is in 3D. It's pretty cool. But I think you're right. It's going to go into the goggles. Yeah. I think racing games in the goggles would be a much better experience than TV.
Yeah, I think the goggles are going to be where that happens. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, would the same rig work for VR 180?
Only if I had not the same rig because I don't have a 180-degree lens. So you definitely can do. I've definitely done a lot of 180, 180-degree stereo. So that's 2 180 lenses right next to each other, interocular, looking out, and it looks great. The biggest challenge you get into is frame rate. That 30 frames a second in that is not great. 24 is really not great. 60 starts to get interesting, and 120 is very compelling. In those frame rates. Next question.
Ron McNulty in Vancouver, Canada, has our second to last one. How many people have a Fujifilm Real 3D
This is
camera?
Roz McNulty.
Oh, Roz, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. HD and movie, I do. So who has real?
I have the 2, the W1 and the W, I think it's W3 or whatever. I have both of those. I don't know if I have them within hand's reach, but I have those. I have the hydrogen. I've been interested in 3D since I was a kid, with a little I can never remember the name of it, but the
Viewmaster.
Viewmaster. I love the Viewmaster as a kid, just loved it. And so I would just be happy with an app. Part of what I was interested in this is that I would be happy with an app that I just do, the cardboard. I thought we would get a real Viewmaster one where we could share photos back and forth. And I thought I'd get something like that with the hydrogen, and never did. The hydrogen's nice because you can just look at it. You can look at 3D that was shot on it, and it looks 3D. The problem is the lenses, the lenses aren't far enough apart. I really wish the Apple phone would have one camera on the other side, so you could have interocular and shoot 3D. I think it'd be really fun. Next question.
Comes from Christian Ortiz in South Florida. Are there different types of 3D? Is blue-red just one type?
Blue-red is just one type. There's polarized, so different polarization so each eye only shows one of those. That gives you better color representation, but it can be a little darker, so that it requires more out of the projector or for the camera. There is also these. You can put it in where if your head's in the right place, you can it can do it on the screen. That's what the hydrogen does. I think reticular. I always say the name wrong, but you can do it in the screen, and then of course there's just each eye that Don Kamarachka showed, so you can have each eye in very old fashioned to see it. So there's a lot of different ways to do 3D. This is just one that is relatively easy, and one that I wanted to show because we could show it over Zoom, which I thought was just fascinating. We have a technology that we don't need anything special other than to see it over Zoom. Next question.
Ed Rubin in Oakland says, are there any good examples of 3D astronomy photos?
There have been. I have seen some. Most of them are rendered, but I haven't seen. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, you're correct. They're all rendered. They're rendered from scientific data, though, so they're accurate,
right.
But they're rendered.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any at arm's reach, but they're definitely out there. And again, search space anaglyph. The main thing is that I hope that a handful of people here get excited about this and go and search, search for anaglyphs and get interested in it. And it's not something that I think is becoming like all of office hours gets into it, but there could be, if a handful of us, get into it, we could have some fun. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I just thought I'd like to show that I have a Litro. So the Litro actually does 3D from a single sensor. So that question did come up. Litros aren't made anymore. The company's gone default. So
right.
But this is a Litro camera it's a light field camera. This is a larger one. So this is the one that actually has pretty good 3D versus their prototype one, which was a little lipstick camera.
I have that one. I didn't get the bigger one.
So the larger one, the Illume is pretty cool on what it can do for 3D. It's subtle. Its 3D is probably good up to probably about 20 feet. Beyond that, it's still 3D, but it's just subtle. It's actually quite pleasant to watch.
And for most of the stuff that we've done, it is about 20 feet. So when you start thinking in 3D, a lot of stuff we've done with stereo, I think in 3 feet to 20 feet is really the range. And when people say, "Oh, we want to do 3D and we want it to be, 50 feet away," I'm like, "You're not going to see anything." There's Ken showing a. This is from the space station. Hold on. Oh yeah. Oh. Everyone grabs their glasses. Pin that. Let's see. That's slick. And Ken, is this just a collection of whoa.
Yeah, I just found this on when I did a Anaglyph space, and then this it's on YouTube. Yeah,
and you can see some of that, at least over Zoom. Some of it works and some of it doesn't work as well. It's interesting. I wonder if.
And are you able to check if you're getting?
It's interesting if I move it to just another monitor, it looks better. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same when I'm looking at on my laptop screen as compared to the Wacom tablet. The Wacom tablet is well, actually, this one doesn't have as good effect, but it did on when you're showing your previous photos. It looked better on the Wacom than it did on the laptop screen.
I'm having the same, like literally just moving to the Zoom to another monitor has changed it. So I am, that's something that for us to figure out. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so that NASA video is Don Pettit. So he took this with a Panasonic stereo. So
a
twin lens camera, 2012. So this is 2012 International Space Station.
That's great.
Oh, that modified HMC 150, I think that has two.
Yeah. Yeah, we shot with that. It's good. It was fun. It was really fun to have it. Yeah, it was good. But we got it working with two HV20s. We just Pixel Conduit. We put a bunch of 3D tools into it. There's a bunch of stereo tools in Pixel Conduit. So you can give it 2 feeds and just go, and you could play with convergence and everything else built into Conduit in the software live, and it would just comp it. So it would also pull green screen. So you could do green screen keys in stereo with a live feed through Pixel Conduit, and that was like circa 2010, 2011. So it was we definitely, it's been, I know we just keep coming back to it. Last question.
Craig Kadoke in Toronto says, Matt in the kitchen, 3D lab, question mark, and then a smile emoji.
It'd be fun. It'd be fun. There'd be something about there was something that would be like taking geek to a whole nother level if we all had glasses on and we were all trying to cook together and looking at each other in 3D. I think it might be a little OTT, but
you at least need to do the overhead camera in 3D and then throw some cooking sherry in the pan so that the flames come directly at you.
Exactly. All right. Anyway, hopefully, I know that was more of a niche than we usually put into a weekday, but I thought it would be kind of fun for some of us to watch it. Hopefully, people enjoyed that, and we'll put we'll have Chad put somewhere wherever he thinks it makes sense to put an Anaglyph channel in. If people want to post cool images on Anaglyphs and ideas and rigs and so on and so forth. It's mostly me just throwing a match into some dry grass and seeing if anything burns. So we'll see how that goes. All right. We're going to jump to the post show. Thanks to the producers who, of course, kept everything rolling again. And thanks to the panelists who were, of course, great answers. Lots of great answers. So we'll see you in the post show.